Well, welcome back to the Faith Roots podcast. We're continuing our mini series looking at legalism, and today we're going to talk about Cassandra's lift. So, as I said last time, the plan is to work through a load of scenarios. We've got lots of them to go through. We're going to talk about them, and we're going to think about the following questions. We're going to talk about what might be a legalistic solution to the particular pastoral issue. Then we're going to ask what might a grace-based approach be like. That approach that looks at the heart, that talks about what it means to be people who have been saved, that already have a right relationship with God and with each other. Been filled with the Holy Spirit, and that leads to a love and a concern for others. And then we're going to ask, is there anything, and we're also going to ask, is there anything else that you might want to know, want to think about as you try to look at this pastoral issue? So the intention is to be very practical. Remember that we're defining legalism as a mechanistic approach to keeping rules in order to enjoy favour with God and the approval of others. Scenario 1. Alan is often seen offering Cassandra a lift home life group to speak to them, to Alan and Cassandra. Well, let's have a think about this. What is the legalistic engagement with this type of issue? Where is legalism here? You may have heard of something called the Billy Graham rule. Billy Graham rule originates with Billy Graham, who was an evangelist with a ministry all around the world. He used to preach to packed football stadiums all around the world. And that meant that he was often on the road, initially just traveling around the States of America and then internationally. And through the time when he was called into this type of evangelism, there were other people who were building up a name, a reputation as evangelists, even getting their own TV shows, becoming known as TV evangelists. And all around Billy Graham were people getting caught in adultery and their ministry being destroyed and the media having a field day. Billy Graham's concern was that he wanted to honour God. He wanted God to be glorified. He didn't want God's name to be put to shame. He didn't want even false accusations or temptation on him and stumbling and falling on his part to compromise the gospel. He didn't want to even give the opportunity for the media to create a story about him. And also he wanted his wife and his family to know that they were safe and their relationships were rock solid. And so Billy Graham resolved never to be on his own with another woman. That became developed into a rule that particularly started with people in ministry, but sort of worked through the house, that a man should never be alone with a woman that isn't his wife. And the first thing to say at this stage is think about Billy Graham's concerns there. They are good, godly concerns, a desire to love and honour God, to safeguard the gospel, and to love and to protect others by keeping a watch on his own heart, his own life. Here are some of the problems with that approach, with that rule. One it doesn't actually guard the heart. It is possible to make sure that you are never alone with a woman and for your mind to be filled with all kinds of lust. And remember that Jesus said that if we lust in our challenge for each of us. Here's the second problem. That presumes a society where the only type of sexual temptation is going to be across genders, men to women, women to men. But in a world where same sex attraction is as significant, so in a world where ways to meet up, it is possible to not be physically in the same room as a woman, but or on your screen. Big scandals around that kind of thing at the moment. And what is that rule doing or saying? The feedback from a lot of women, a lot of young women, a lot of older women as well, has been this, that the way that that rule has been described and at least they feel like they are predators and women feel like they are dangerous temptresses. And it particularly objectivizes the woman. She is a danger simply because she's a woman. Therefore, she has to be treated as a danger. So those are the dangers. But I want to keep going back to this point that we cannot just ignore the issue because sexual temptation is real. We want to be in a situation because no one was brave enough to say to somebody, "You're heading down a dangerous path there." So is there a different approach to this, a non-legalistic one? The legalistic one is for me as an elder, if asked to go and speak to Alan and Cassandra and say, you must stop the lift sharing. Discussions, no questions, no exceptions. You should not be doing that. Statistically as well, I might look in and assume and say the reason that you are having lifts together is because there is something going on that is unhealthy, that is wrong, that having the lift itself is sinful, and that this is something that they should be ashamed about. That would be the legalistic approach. Is there a grace-based Holy Spirit fruitfulness approach? I want to suggest that there is. It's going to start with questions. You may remember I said that there may be other questions you want to ask before you act. What I wanted to ask is, who is it that has asked me to speak to them, and why? Because there may be a conversation that I need to have with that person before I even start talking to Alan and Cassandra. Because the problem may not be with Alan and Cassandra, it may be somewhere else. or that person may have additional information that may be helpful to a gospel confrontation. So it may turn out that Francesca is the person. I'm just making names up, by the way. There's not real people in our church. This will become clearer with some of the other scenarios. I've got people like Melchizedek and that kind of thing going on. But Francesca is the person who's spoken to you. Now, supposing that it turns out that Francesca next door to next door to the lady here, next door to Cassandra. Should have made these names more memorable for myself, shouldn't I? So Francesca's living next door to Cassandra. She could have offered Cassandra a lift, but she never has done. She's actually driven past Cassandra in the pouring rain. Alan's aware of that, and so he stepped in and he gives her a lift. Then actually challenge Francesca about her own heart attitude. Why isn't she offered the lift? Is there a risk here that she is simply looking and judging? Is she, in fact, under the guise of asking us to pray or asking us to intervene, is she actually gossiping? It turns out that actually Francesca is deeply jealous of Cassandra. She wants a relationship with Alan. There's actually nothing going on between Alan and Cassandra, but Francesca would love to be in a relationship with Alan. I'm assuming that he's single here. That might be another thing to say, that it would be wrong for her to have a relationship with Alan, but there might be different ways to approach it. Or it might be that Alan is married. It could be that Francesca is Alan's wife, pleading for help. Or it could be that Francesca has actually offered Cassandra a lift, and for whatever reason, she never gets taken up on it, even though it means that Alan goes out of his way in the other direction to pick Cassandra up. That would put a different perspective on things. So there may be things you want to talk to Francesca about her heart. Maybe things you want to talk with Alan and Cassandra about. And again, things to think about. Is it two single people? Is there a desire for a relationship? What would be the healthy way of... Is there a married man giving someone a lift? And if so, is it just altruistic? And why shouldn't it be? They go the same way. He doesn't want her out in the dark, walking. How is he protecting and guarding his heart? How is he being accountable? It may be that he shouldn't give her a lift every time. If there is temptation and we don't know how, then yeah, the lifts have to stop. But be aware that even if you stop the lifts, unless the heart issue has been addressed, unless you've got to the bottom of what does it mean for Alan and Cassandra's hearts to be right with God, for there to be an abandoning of idolatry, a turning to Christ and clinging to Him, unless that is flowing out in a concern for what is loving to the other person and to other people in the church, what will be about the peace of the church, what is going to bring joy to God's family, to the other person, what is kind and generous and gracious to them. How do we be patient? All those things. Unless that is talked about, and just imposing the rule and saying no more lifts. Actually, there are all kinds of ways that we may be tempted in our life where we do need to be challenged. And I want to suggest that a good thing for you and me to ask when we think about these challenges is what would be helpful for my holiness? How would I like them to speak to me if I was Alan or I was Cassandra? Well, get in touch, send comments in. How would you tackle that pastoral issue? Thanks for listening.